So, as a nutrition coach, you need to be able to deliver your clients results. And it all comes down to creating a plan that is going to be scientifically based so that it's like reliable. You can get them repeated results. It focuses on the things that matter the most. But at times, and I know this is the case for many nutrition coaches, when they get that knowledge and the skills to be able to do that stuff and they start to lean into it in terms of what they need to be doing and focusing on, um, they can get misled, and it stems from a lot of times like well-meaning nutrition certifications and things that like theoretically should work, but when we put them into practice, they don't work like that, and a lot of times it can impact our client results. Um, they don't get the results that they typically want, or even worse, at times they can go backwards. I want to teach you one simple trick to overcome that tonight. And it's actually quite easy to do. And it has a lot more to do with coaching the person in front of us and using the theory as a guide as opposed to the thing that we completely rely on. And it's super simple and easy to do. Before we dive into that, if you want to know a little bit more about how the Dr. Mark method is getting the nutrition coaches we teach amazing results, they feel confident about what they're doing. They know that if their clients follow what they're doing, and suggesting, they're going to they're going to completely transform. And that's the confidence you kind of need as a coach. Enrollment for our program is open right now. And I'm going to drop a link for you to check out more information in the chat there, drmarkmethod.com/program. Check it out. Enrollment's going to be open until next Wednesday. We do have a limited space. We're going to take on about 5 new students. Had a few calls today. So if you're considering it, time to move on it is now. Let's dive into this topic though, in terms of like a simple trick that you can do to set up a client on like a better plan, a plan more suited for them, a plan that'll be easier for them to follow and produce better results. What I want you guys leaving here today feeling like is that there's a big difference between like theoretically what should be happening and what actually like someone does and what they actually do. So for example, I'm 5'8", 180 pounds. In terms of lean body mass, I'm probably around like 12%, 15% body fat, probably closer to 15, let's be honest. But I have like a high level of lean body mass in comparison. You start to like think about like how many, to set me up on a nutrition plan, first we need to know how many calories I'd be burning in a day, right? Depending on my goals and that kind of stuff. But from those amount of calories that I'm burning, we can work backwards and say, hey, this is how much food Dr. Mark needs to be eating to stay at energy balance and meet his goals. The issue is though, is that theoretically that's what I should be consuming. But if I tell someone to do that and I follow it and I end up, if my goal is to lose body fat and get leaner and I end up gaining weight, I wasn't actually at maintenance to begin with, right? So we need to start thinking about this stuff a little bit more like kind of like with our detective hats and go from there, as opposed to just trusting these calculations, trusting like what the textbook says, and getting a bit closer to what the person is actually doing, because that's going to factor in their nutrition literacy, their food skills, where they're at and what they're currently doing a little bit more. And it's going to be easier for them to follow as well as produce better results. So what I would prefer you guys do in most cases when you're thinking about setting someone up on a nutrition plan for the first part, just give you a quick rundown on like flexible dieting. As a nutrition coach, it's going to be much more effective for you to get clients results by teaching them how to eat, as opposed to being overly prescriptive and showing them exactly what to do, like in a meal plan or better or worse choices or food suggestions, something like that. If we could control for the things that they do on a daily basis, their overall calories, their macronutrient levels, we'll be able to teach them in terms of like what their overall diet needs to look like, as well as the choices within that diet. And that's going to produce better results than just saying, blindly follow this meal plan, at least for, a period of time. They can follow the meal plan for a little bit and see good results, but it'll be tough to follow because it's not usually based on the foods they like eating. And even then, if they get results, they'll start to think it's because of the meal plan and not the science that made the meal plan, if that makes sense. So it's much more effective to set them up with food levels based on their individual situation and where they're at, and then allow them and teach them the habits that they need to fill that structure to get results. So we set people up on calorie targets, macronutrient targets, and some low hanging fruit around like, well, here's what you need to do to fill these targets now, and then check in with them on a weekly basis. And that's more or less like a big component of the individualized plan. Where most coaches go wrong, though, is that they use calculations. Typically, we determine calories first, and then the macronutrients fill those calories, right? But they use textbook calculations to guide those numbers from the beginning and more or less give their client, hey, here's what you need to be doing based on the calculations I ran, and don't really take into consideration what the client is currently doing. And this is where clients tend to go backwards. They don't get any results. Sometimes they actually regress and they start to look at you like you're a crazy person for having taken their money and sent them backwards based on something that theoretically should be working. What I'd prefer you guys to do is start to assess what they're currently doing. So get them tracking their food and get a better sense of what they're actually doing right now. Track their food, take a look at their energy levels over the averages over a 3 to 5 day basis for calories and macronutrients, and then set those initial targets based on how those compare to the optimal levels that we would assume would help them get results, and find some middle place there between these numbers. And when you can do that stuff, you're going to start factoring in what they're currently doing, their food preferences, their nutrition literacy in terms of like, do they know what the macronutrients are, that kind of stuff, instead of just being like, you need to be consuming 2,500 calories and 200 grams of that is going to come from protein. But even right now, you're only eating 100 grams of protein per day. That's a huge gap. That's too much of a gap for someone to catch up with immediately. So we got to find some middle ground. So the one simple trick that you can do in terms of starting these food levels is base them closer to where someone is at right now, and in between that and what would be optimal, as opposed to going just to what's quote unquote optimal and it for being way too overwhelming for them, and then kind of go from there. This will also start to like help you factor in some like underreporting, right? Because again, this is apples and oranges. What theoretically should be happening and what's reported to be happening are two entirely different things. They're not the same number because they're looked at differently. They're determined differently. Not to say that humans are liars, but it's just like, it's going to be two different things. And it's the same reason why we get on these lives and talk about this all the time. Someone reports that they have a client saying they eat 800 calories a day and they're not losing weight. Well, they're not. They're not doing that consistently. It's not actually 800 calories. It's probably 1,300. It's something that was missed. Something was underreported. Something was skewed. I mean, it's just human nature to report that kind of stuff. So we need to factor those things in. That's the easiest thing you can do. I got a question before the live started here. This may be a bit off topic, but for the free nutrition report, which is essentially the kind of warm-up mechanism we use for potential clients, it's actually very similar to the process that I just described. I've heard that we're supposed to ask prospects to track their normal intake for 3 to 5 days, then make another assessment. Can you please explain what the second assessment is? The second assessment here is more or less like going through those numbers that they reported, the averages, and comparing how they should compare to optimal levels, and starting to give them a starting point. When I say the first assessment, and I might have spoken incorrectly, it's more or less just like going over what they supplied to you for their goals, where they're coming from, and that type of stuff. Does that make sense? If you're still here, I don't have a name here, as well as where that question came from, but great question. Thanks for following up, and hopefully you're working through the actual stuff. But that's where I would start that type of thing. Who else has got some questions tonight? Does this concept make sense in terms of setting some numbers based on where they are versus where we feel they should be? You're going to get much better success based on that. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's like less gap for them to fill. They can still see some results at those levels. It's not like it's not optimal. It's still moving in the right direction. It's just not going to be as overwhelming for them to begin with. And it'll also factor in some of these aspects of, human nature and that type of stuff. This is the whole first module of the Dr. Mark method and that what we work through. Our coaches are so confident about prescribing these plans because we go through scenario after scenario and give them an actual opportunity to try it out on real people and themselves. So they're just getting those reps in around like, I've seen this situation before. I know what this looks like. This is what I would do. This is where I would start. What other questions you guys got tonight? If you've considered taking the program or getting more information, it's always worth a conversation around what that would look like, how the program can help you. Like, even if you're just on the fence about like, hey, I just want to know more information, like reach out and let's talk, let's discuss. Like, without a doubt, like you're not going to know if it's for you or not without having all the details, and you can't have all the details unless you have a conversation. So let's talk about what that would look like. We'll go from there. If you're enjoying the content recently, make sure to hit that like button. That helps the channel grow. Fill me in on where you're thinking about this stuff, if it makes sense, what questions you have. I'm assuming you have questions. Any sort of engagement like that, guys, does help the channel and grow. And I love talking and connecting with you guys. So fill me in on where you're coming from. If there's nothing else for tonight, I'm going to pop off. I'm going to do some reels. I'm going to keep filming things for you to put out there. Any topic ideas, bring them this way. But if not, we'll leave it there for tonight, and have a good one. Bye.